Are you new to wet felting and unsure about the differences between working with wool roving or wool bats, two of the most common forms of wool preparation that are easy accessible and lead to successful wet felting results? My name is Nicola Brown. I'm a textile artist based in rural Ireland, and during this short video I explain what both forms of fibre preparation are, I show you how to work with either, and I share a few pieces of my own that I have made with bats and a few with roving. Let's go. The wool fibre in roving and commercial bats has actually been washed and carded and prepared at a woolen mill. But when you look at them side by side, they are very obviously quite different. Bats come off the carding machine as a fine web. They're put onto a drum, and once they come off this, they end up looking like an actual blanket. So when a wool bat is unrolled, it has multiple layers of fine wool, and it's like a blanket that you can peel or tear apart. Roving takes the process in the mill one stage further. The fibre is washed, it's carded, then it's drawn together and it's given a very slight twist. So when you buy roving, it looks like a big skein of fibre and it's more processed than the bat. The more random layers of fibre in a bat make for very even shrinkage. The longer combed fibres in roving means that the pieces of felt will actually shrink more in the direction in which the roving is laid. This is useful to know because when making certain pieces, such as this felt scarf, I might choose to lay the fibre in one direction only to influence how the felt comes together and which way it shrinks more. I'm very strict about keeping all my black fibre in individual plastic bags, separating it from other fibre because it's a divil for picking up different fluffy bits of colour. When I'm going to work with roving, I start unrolling the fibre and keeping my hands relatively far apart, I pull gently to split the fibre. This gives me a manageable piece to work with. I like to wrap the length of roving lightly around in a coil around my hand. I don't hold it too tightly, this is important, or it will start to make the fibres come together, and it makes it also more difficult to pull them off the end of the length. So as I pull a piece off, I overlap it sideways by approximately 1 centimetre with the shingle beside it. Each individual piece of wool is called a shingle. The bit that I'm grasping with my right hand is straighter, and the wispy ends are the ones that have just come out from the length. And then I would lay a second line, making sure, as I said before, not to grasp it too tightly. So when I lay my second line of fibre, I make sure to overlap the straighter edge with the tips of the previous line. And I also overlap the shingles sideways. So I could lay out a much bigger piece, but I just want to demonstrate when I'm laying the second layer of fibre with roving, I would then lay this in the opposite direction. So one layer would be horizontal and the next layer would be vertical. And in this way, because as I've explained, the roving shrinks more along the length of the fibre, in this way, this piece, if I were to felt it, would shrink evenly. I enjoy using roving for small vessels that don't need to be necessarily very thick or strong. And I also used roving for this vessel with bumps or texture on the surface. This is eco-printed using onion skins. I often use roving for Nuno felt wraps. These are a combination of wool and silk with embellishments, and either one fine layer or one uneven layer of fibre combined with the fabric leads to beautiful results. When it comes to using wool bats, tear a strip from your larger blanket-like piece of wool. So this is the full thickness of the bat, and it's comprised of all these different layers. For the best quality felt, it's really important to subdivide this further. So I'm just going to tear this into 2 different strips, and then I'm going to separate each strip into different layers. To make things even easier, I'm just going to split this in half in the middle. Just put one hand on the table and pull the other section away. And now I'm going to peel this into all these different layers. So it's important to do this to get the best quality felt after you lay it out. And you can see that the layers are a little bit random. They're not totally even, but I try and make them as even as possible. And in this way, I prepare a certain amount of fibre. I put it aside when I'm making a big project, and then I lay it all out, and then I repeat the process again. Now that these pieces are ready, I just proceed to lay out a rectangle of wool in the same way as if I were laying out roving. The only big difference in this case is I do like to put my hand onto the table as I draft the fibre. So rather than separating it in my hand always, I just pop it down onto the table, overlapping each shingle as with the roving, and overlapping the top of each line with the tips from the previous one. Because it's bats, the tips are not as obvious, but it's just important to overlap always for the best results. When I was introduced to felting, in fact, I always used bats. I never even knew that there was such a thing as roving. So it does take a little practice to get used to using them, but honestly, I absolutely love them, and I just really like the feel of them underneath my hand. Many of my favourite sculptural pieces have been felted using merino bats, and here are a couple of examples. I really love how these pieces look, and the bats were excellent for helping make added texture on the surface of these sculptures. These spikes and this little sculptural vessel was also made using merino bats, as were the ring, the bracelet, and the base fibre that I used for this scarf. They were all felted using bats. I don't just work with merino, however, and I did get a commission quite a number of years ago for an extremely large area rug. This was felted using Icelandic wool, and the finished size was over 3 meters in one direction and 2 in the other. A big project. Why not practice making felt cords using my step-by-step tutorial if you're new to working with roving or bats? And for future updates, tips, mini tutorials and advice about eco-printing, felting and a sustainable dye practice, please hit the subscribe button and bell now. Until next time.